about a lot of issues in cities that are very specific to developing countries. So the problems that are going to be faced with is growing urban areas in lesser developed countries are unique and some that are not faced in the Western world. So we already know about the fact that we're going to see larger cities in the developing world in the future. And what does that mean? So one issue is with infant mortality. This is very connected to rural urbanness right now. There's a lot more infant mortality in rural areas than in urban areas. So we expect that just by a lot of people moving to cities, we're going to solve a lot of issues related to childbirth. There's also greater maternal mortality in rural areas in developing countries. So that's one aspect where almost certainly we'll get reductions in that. However, economy and urbanization have a greater effect. So the more people you have living in urban areas, the lower mortality you have, but it's still very differentiated. So here we still see this trend of greater urbanization leading to decline infant mortality, but it's geographically striking. So African countries, which are most of the poorest countries in the world are African countries, still are just overall shifted higher on this child mortality curve. And a lot of these patterns continue. We see urbanization having this consistent trend of improving ecological and health benefits, but the level of economic development makes these still be issues in some places. So here you've got cities in Africa that still have infant mortality rates that exceed that in rural areas in other countries. So yeah, another way to look at it is it really connects to wealth. So this is kind of where we get again into, we cannot really disconnect. I mean, in some ways you can't really disconnect anything from anything, but we really can't disconnect ecological impact, urbanization, and levels of wealth and income inequality. So right now, income inequality means the loss of life in a lot of areas, and it's very clear when you can see that comparing Asia and Africa, where Asia and Africa have very similar degrees of urbanization. Right, you've got mostly rural areas with a few growing cities overall, but the degrees of wealth are very different. That is something that needs to be addressed in designing these cities in the future that will be coming up. A lot of the solutions are very basic. So in a lot of places, even in Mexico, which many people don't really consider third world. If there is a second world, Mexico would probably be in it. That just having dirt floors is actually problematic for health in a lot of ways. You have parasitic infections and many other diseases that are related to dirt floors. So just using the cheapest material you can to sort of pave over that dirt can lead to major improvements in health. But this is something that needs to be paid for. And also there needs to be awareness about this kind of thing. So as urbanization proceeds, if it can ameliorate a lot of these basic problems of basic living conditions, we can get major improvements in health. Water treatment's another example. We just talked about water treatment in New York. In many areas, especially rural areas, in developing countries, there is no wastewater system to speak of. And if you remember the earthquake in Haiti, a couple of years ago, the biggest health impact out of that earthquake was a lot of people died just because of buildings like not being designed to withstand earthquakes. But also there was a huge disease epidemics afterwards because same thing when the Gowanus Canal floods. When you get that flood water from the Gowanus is different from general flood water from the Pacific Ocean. So the same way here. Flood water in a city that has no water sewage system is different from a flood in the city that does have a water sewage system. So in other words, all that fecal matter, everything else that goes into the toilet is now flooding that entire area. It becomes a hotbed for mosquitoes and other vectors of disease. Cholera becomes a big issue as well. So there's a lot of health impacts that relate. And when you talk about climate change, we're increasing the frequency and the intensity of some of these impacts. So the failure to address some of these basic infrastructure problems could have increasing impacts in the future. So yeah, so there's still a lot of areas that where access to improved facilities, by which we mean, things like not having a dirt floor, having basic water treatment, is very differentially distributed. So mostly in the west and the north, we've got almost complete coverage of improved facilities, but in a large part of the world, including where most of the growth is happening, there's only limited access.